Welcome to the Connext Community Call number 7, which we actually have some special guests today from Fuji. Very excited to chat with these guys today. I'm Gerard. You may recognize me from previous Twitter Spaces. If I sound a little bit funny today, I'm just coming down off the end of a bad cold, so I may be slightly more nasally than usual, but what else is new? So we're just going to get started by doing a bit of a go-around. So we'll start by introducing our guests from Fuji. So if, Mark, you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about Fuji to start, that would be fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, GM. How's it going, everybody? My name is Mark. I'm on the Fuji team helping out on the BD side of things. Just a quick intro on myself. Been in the space for a while now. I guess bought my first crypto back in like 2014 era. Been working full time in the space for the last like 6-7 years. And huge fan of what Connext is building. So I've been working with the Fuji team for the last like 6 or 7 months. And yeah, so that's, I guess, a little quick background on myself. For those of you who are listening who aren't really familiar with Fuji and what we're building, we built the first borrowing aggregator on Ethereum back in early 2021. The company was actually created in a hackathon. And over the last 12 months or so, we have been working on a new fancy product, which we are calling Himalaya. This is our V2. We've actually been working very closely with the Connext team since, I guess, we participated in, another hackathon about 12 months ago, where we built the first cross-chain debt teleporter. And to talk about what we are actually building with our V2, it is a cross-chain money market aggregator. This means that you are able to deposit, borrow, and repay a position from any chain. And from the user's perspective, you're able to go and optimize both your deposit rates and your borrow rates. So we're going and rebalancing positions between various money markets that a specific vault connects with. So you can make sure that you are able to get either the best yield or the best borrow rate possible. So it either helps you to make more money as a lender or save more money if you're a borrower. And yeah, so that's a little rundown of what Fuji is and what we're building. We just launched our V2 basically a week ago. So little round of applause. So big shout out to the team for getting things over the finish line. It's been a lot of work to get to this point, and we're super excited about what's coming next. And a big thank you to Arjun and the entire Connext team, who has been incredibly supportive of us over basically since we first met them and since I've been a part of the team. So just want to say thank you to the entire Connext team for all the support that you've provided to us, and excited what we're able to do next. So yeah, that's a quick intro on myself and what the Fuji team is building.
Perfect. And I'll allow that to pivot to our other guest from Fuji. We'll let you introduce yourself a little bit. Am I saying it right? Is it Prague Brewer?
GM to Connext team. Yeah, exactly. Prague Brewer. I'm community manager at Fuji Finance. I've been in decentralized finance space since March 2020, and like with Fuji, I'm already 1.5 years old. I'm really glad that we're building really cool stuff together with Connext. And like I believe that this all stuff about cross-chain, it's one of the most cornerstones of decentralized finance in the future. So I really appreciate that Connext building such really cool project. And it's pretty all about myself. I believe if I can ask you to give speakers right to Fuji Finance, because Bayan already joined us and he also wants to introduce probably Fuji Finance and how all it started.
Definitely. We can have our host give that access very shortly here. And now we'll flip it over to the Connext side and allow our Connext speakers to introduce themselves. So we'll start with Arjun.
Hello, I'm Arjun. I'm one of the founders of Connext. If you're on this call, you probably know what Connext is, but Connext is building wants to try to solve the user experience and fragmentation hurdles of this interchain world that we now live in. We want to do that by making it possible for developers to build applications that can live on multiple chains at the same time and interact with funds and data on multiple chains at the same time. And we really believe that users like you all should not ever have to actually think about what chain you're on, especially as we move towards a world with many, many more chains and rollups, probably in the hundreds by this time next year. And yeah, I guess I'll hand it over and we'll probably get more into details over the course of this call.
Perfect. And last but not least, you can introduce yourself, Alex.
GM all, I'm Alex. I am in product at Connext, so I focus on anything kind of user related. So at any point in the stack where we want users to have the best experience, and also just some of our kind of product lines that we've launched recently that we'll get into today.
Wonderful. All right, well, let's kick things off and talk a little bit more detail about the xERC20 news that has been coming out. So I'll hand it over to Arjun and you can take it away.
A couple of weeks ago, we introduced this concept of xERC20s, also known as ERC7281. xERC20 is an open public proposal for a standard for how people can bridge tokens between chains while retaining the kind of core fungibility properties that people care about. So not ending up with multiple different tokens on the destination chain, without having to, and also without having to spend, for the token issuers to have to spend tons and tons of money on liquidity. And ideally also without having to end up in a situation like what happened with multi-chain, where as a token issuer, you are kind of locked into one option forever, and you face this really huge security risk. So let's jump into what that means and why we're doing this for this space in general. So to start with, there's this kind of weird trade-off space that exists when bridging tokens. When you bridge a token from one chain to another, what's actually going on under the hood? Well, the first and foremost thing that has to happen is that you need to create a representation of that token on another chain. So say for example, you have some token XYZ that's on Ethereum, and you want to, you bridge it to Arbitrum through the Arbitrum bridge. What's happening is that XYZ gets locked into the Arbitrum bridge, and then the Arbitrum bridge, this is just their normal rollup bridge, mints Arbitrum XYZ on Arbitrum. Now we consider this to be a safe path to do, a safe thing to do, because the Arbitrum bridge already is underpins the security of the whole Arbitrum ecosystem. And so when you get, Arbitrum bridge minted XYZ on Arbitrum, you most people consider that to be what we call the canonical asset, the canonical XYZ, which means it's the one that everybody kind of collectively agrees is the right version of XYZ. But of course, for the rollups and also for a lot of other ecosystems, bridging back and forth from L1 to L2 isn't a fast thing. L2 to L1 especially is extremely long, taking 7 days. And it gets even more complicated when you want to do things like bridge from Arbitrum to Optimism or to another ecosystem, because all of those transactions then need to go through Ethereum, which is ridiculously expensive. And this is the reason why bridging as a concept became important starting in 2021. So because of that, if you're a token issuer, so if you're the person that created token XYZ, what you normally will look for is some way to help your users get XYZ between chains more easily. And this is where things start to get kind of complicated. Now there's two high level approaches to doing this at this stage, or there were two high level approaches. The first is you use something like multi-chain, which is basically minting another representation of XYZ. And so when a user goes and bridges XYZ from Optimism to Arbitrum using multi-chain in the past, that would create any XYZ, which was multi-chain's own representation of XYZ, which was basically a pointer to funds locked in multi-chain on another chain, and not in the Arbitrum bridge. So now you have two different tokens on Arbitrum. You have canonical XYZ and then any XYZ. And you can imagine why that ends up being extremely confusing for users and also just a terrible, terrible experience. But you can also imagine why, in cases where there isn't a canonical bridge, so where you're not on Arbitrum and you don't have an official bridge that everybody agrees is the kind of default one that everybody should use. So in cases where you're on a chain like Phantom, where there is no official bridge, you can see why it becomes very easy for something like any USD to then, or any XYZ to then become the canonical asset. In other words, meaning the bridged token, the wrapped kind of token that is created by multi-chain in this case, if it gets enough adoption for a chain where there is no canonical asset, that then becomes the de facto canonical asset because everybody just socially agrees like, okay, this is the one that everyone's using anyway, so we have to use it. So that's approach number one. Approach number one is you have some third-party bridge that goes and mints their own version of the token on the destination chain. And their own version of the token could potentially be not fungible with the canonical XYZ. Approach number two, and this is the one that has historically been used by Connext and Across and Hop and basically all of the other liquidity-based bridges, is an approach where the bridge protocol, in this case Connext, holds token like canonical XYZ on Arbitrum. And so when you bridge, when you try to bridge XYZ from Optimism to Arbitrum, instead of minting its own version of XYZ, Connext actually just gives you XYZ, like canonical XYZ from the Arbitrum bridge, from a pool of funds. And this pool is provided by users or potentially provided by some of the teams. Now, this is a great approach because as a user, you are actually getting the right asset on the destination chain. And so from a user experience perspective, this is definitely way better than getting some like other wrapped asset that would have otherwise been really confusing to interact with and have like weird security properties. So as soon as XYZ is delivered to you as a user by Connext on the destination chain, you're kind of done and you can go do whatever you want in the Arbitrum ecosystem with XYZ. The challenge is for token issuers and for Connext and for users, this model only works if you can bootstrap enough liquidity of XYZ. And in order to bootstrap liquidity, you need to have liquidity pools. And in order to successfully have liquidity pools that don't get unbalanced over time and things like that, you need to have pricing. So basically, you have to introduce slippage and fees that people pay to be able to then get the right version of XYZ on the destination. And this is where things get kind of complicated because for some tokens, bootstrapping liquidity is pretty easy, or not easy, but at least it's like possible, right? So for tokens, larger tokens like ETH, the USDC, USDT, there are good incentives for people to go and like supply tokens, like project tokens or other kinds of incentives to go and get like tens of millions of dollars in liquidity for that token. But say we're talking about token XYZ once again here. If you're a project that's issuing token XYZ and token XYZ doesn't have a massive market cap and realistically doesn't have a lot of people transferring it, then it's not going to be generating a lot of fees from cross-chain bridging. It's also not really going to be worthwhile for projects like Connext or for even for you guys as the token issuer to spend potentially millions of dollars to go and bootstrap liquidity of XYZ into each chain you support. And this problem gets worse. So as the number of chains increases, so today we were talking about Arbitrum and Optimism, but in a world where there's now like hundreds of rollups, you have to go and bootstrap liquidity on each and every one of those rollups. So your cost to like support XYZ on every chain grows with the number of chains. And in a world where you want to have everything, we want to work towards this world where users don't ever need to consciously think about what chain they're on and to be able to use applications that live on any chain using XYZ as kind of a token to be able to stake XYZ on one chain and like trade it on another chain, etc. In this kind of a world, it's just completely impossible to actually make that work in a cost-effective way for every token. Just because it's going to be just too expensive for you as the issuer of token XYZ to go and build liquidity for it on every chain or rollup that's out there. So we're kind of stuck right now. This is where the space is at the moment. If you're a token issuer, you have one of two options. You either go and work with some third-party bridge provider to create a proprietary token, like any XYZ or Layer 0's OFTs, or Axelar's new like AXL tokens, which is the kind of interchain token service thing that they just announced, or a bunch of others, right? Seller had their own version, Router had their own version, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. instead of, so like that's kind of one option. You either tie yourself completely to one ecosystem forever, and then the risk there is that you end up in a situation where, which is what just happened with multi-chain, which is where if your token is tied to multi-chain everywhere on every chain, if multi-chain gets hacked, your token is now unbacked. And like you now need to figure out all of your token value has basically just gone to zero, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so that's kind of like one option you have on the table, where you take on these like security risks and the user experience hurdle of having like many different token implementations, but you have really great pricing everywhere and you don't need to pay money. Or the other option is that you have to pay lots and lots of money and it doesn't really scale, and it's only really works for people who have really, who have raised tons and tons of money from VCs. Obviously, neither of those are real solutions. And so what we realized was that there's just like kind of broken incentives in the space right now, where if you're a bridge project, including Connext, you're sort of incentivized to try to monopolize on liquidity or to try to monopolize on like your own proprietary tokens. But both of these options are actually bad for users, and they're bad for projects, they're bad for the space, and they just really will not work long term. And I personally have gotten very increasingly concerned about a case where, like, what we saw happen with multi-chain will happen again with other bridge projects. And I'm extremely concerned about an outcome where, the majority of the tokens one day, if they happen to be running on like layer 0 or happen to be running on XLR, and one of those projects gets hacked, that is a systemic risk for the space. Like that could set crypto back almost decades, which is insane. That's something that has to be stopped right now. The xERC20 approach takes a totally different mindset, and this is something where like we feel really strongly for this approach, because even though we're the ones that are pushing it, it does feel like objectively the right solution because it is a fully bridge agnostic approach. And the mental model for xERC20 is you don't have the bridge own the token. And that doesn't mean, that's true regardless of whether it's like a canonical bridge, like the Arbitrum bridge that's minting the token, or a third-party bridge like multi-chain or layer 0 that's minting the token. In either case, it does not make sense for the bridge to own the token representation on a given chain. Instead, you as the issuer of XYZ should be the owner of XYZ on every chain. And in fact, you should be the person that gets to decide which bridges can mint it and burn it and which bridges cannot. And in any case where bridges are minting and burning XYZ, they should always be minting and burning the same token on the destination chain. So with the xERC20 approach, it's actually just two very simple concepts. One, it's a mechanism by which on the token itself, you can basically allow list whichever bridges you want to be able to mint or burn the token on all chains. And two, you can set limits for how much each bridge can mint or burn. And the limits is a really important piece, because otherwise the security of any one bridge becomes the security of all bridges. And so maybe to like expand on that a little bit, say, for example, I had a token that Connext could mint, again, XYZ, that Connext could mint on Arbitrum and multi-chain could mint on Arbitrum. And both of us could mint an infinite amount of tokens. Well, it doesn't matter at that point how secure Connext is anymore at all. If multi-chain gets hacked and multi-chain can mint an infinite number of tokens, then all of the tokens, then a hack of multi-chain is basically a hack of this token, regardless of whatever Connext does about it. Rate limits solves this problem. It makes it so that the total amount of funds that could be lost in a hack is limited by the person who, by the token issuer. So if you are the issuer of token XYZ, you can basically decide, I want to allow multi-chain to be able to mint 100,000 tokens per day. And I want to allow Connext to be able to mint 500,000 tokens per day. And in that case, if multi-chain gets hacked, your total loss is 100,000 tokens. If Connext gets hacked, your total loss is 500,000 tokens. And in the time that it takes for those rate limits to come back and be replenished, you can then have a governance vote, have your DAO basically remove Connext or remove multi-chain, or remove any other bridge that has been hacked from the system, and then just keep going. You don't have to deal with now having a depegged token. You don't have to deal with, there's so many examples of this happening in the last couple of years, and they've all been awful, right? Nomad was an example of this. Harmony was an example of this. Wormhole was an example of this, but luckily Jump backstopped it. But if they hadn't, it would have been extremely catastrophic. And the exact same thing is happening today with multi-chain, where the entire Phantom ecosystem is kind of fucked. And there's a ton of other tokens that we've talked to that are in a similar position where their tokens are now actually not worth anything anymore. And there's no way for them to change it. The only way for them to fix it is for them to actually fully migrate off of the token that they're using currently to something completely different. Now, from our perspective, this is all just like completely unsustainable for the space. And the only solution, the only way that we can actually fix this for everybody is to have a fair way for bridges to be able to mint tokens where there's no like monopolization by any bridge, and where token issuers really are the ones that are in control. And that, in a nutshell, is really what xERC20 does.
All right. So we want to open this up to kind of create a bit of a roundtable here. Any guys from Fuji, Prague, or Mark, do you guys have any comments or thoughts on the xERC20 standard?
I think one of the things that I'm pretty interested to see is how that might be able to help benefit. And Arjun, maybe you can actually help clarify on this. Is like I know an example that it might be able to help specifically with like the token standard perspective, or like the token contract that's like deployed onto various chains. I know when you go and deploy like a multi-sig, for example, like a Gnosis safe multi-sig, the contract address for that safe is different on every single chain. Does the new standard, and I actually don't know if I can remember offhand if it actually solves that problem, but does the contract address change for every single network that the token is deployed to, or how does that sort of operate?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So just to kind of disambiguate, I want to make sure that I kind of talk about this from the perspective. So there's sort of two perspectives here, right? There's this ERC standard, which is a written standard, right? And then if you look at go look at the ERC20 standard specification, all that is it's a write-up of the different interfaces that anybody that's implementing a token in the entire space should adhere to, must adhere to, in order to comply with the standard. So that's kind of like that's one thing that is being talked about here, which is specifically the xERC20 standard. And then there is Connext's implementation of xERC20. So the difference between these two is like the paper standard that says, okay, every ERC20 token must implement a transfer method and a transfer from method. And then there's like the actual token implementation of like, okay, you have staked ETH as a token implementation. That's an ERC20 token. Now, staked ETH does the normal token stuff, but it also does a bunch of other things in the background to like change the token supply and to muck with like the way that the token is valued depending on like the amount of ETH that is staked in the beacon chain and things like that. And so I guess all of that is to say that there is, with the standard itself in general, you want to basically be as minimal as possible to give people the flexibility to decide how they want to implement these kinds of features. But then the implementation can be the place where a lot of these types of things are solved. Now, specifically to answer your question, the standard itself doesn't specify that the token needs to be the same address on each chain. And the reason it doesn't do this is because, one, it's not always possible to do that. Two, it really isn't always desirable to do that. So there's certain kinds of use cases where you actually want a different address. And we don't want people to not adopt the standard because it makes you do something that is completely unrelated to the core benefit of the standard. However, we believe that for the vast majority of cases, the vast majority of tokens, you do actually want to have the same address on each chain. And so in our implementation of the standard, in our factory contracts for deploying your own xERC20, yes, when you go and deploy your own xERC20 through Connext, that will have the same address on all chains. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, no, that definitely does. Really love how you have that I guess like added customization to it. That's super cool.
It'd be kind of cool to see if folks in the audience have questions as well, because the xERC20 stuff is very new, and it's solving a problem that I think otherwise has been talked about a lot, because bridge hacks and especially token bridge hacks have really been like just a huge discussion and pain point. And like It's just, but the reasons for why they happen are actually somewhat complex, and like I think most people don't really have a lot of nuanced understanding into like what the different trade-offs are, or what the different approaches are.
100%. All right, so we'll leave it open to some audience questions below. If you guys do have any questions for the team about xERC20, just drop them in the Twitter thread for this Spaces, and we'll come back to them when we move forward. We'll just bump on to the next portion. We'll hand it over to Alex for a short bit, and he can talk to us a little about some Connext updates.
Sure, yeah. And actually, before we move on, I mean, Arjun, you covered this, but just to drive it home, I think one of the interesting things about the standard is that as a token issuer today, right, like if you were to adopt this new design, you wouldn't necessarily have to change your like security and bridge structure significantly, right? Like you could actually adopt this and still just use the same bridges they use today, or you could choose just to use one bridge. It just allows more like optionality and flexibility, I believe. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, exactly. Like that's something that's really, really important to stress, is like the xERC20 standard is not a Connext standard at all. Like there's literally, I mean, you can look at this, you can read the standard. I mean, I wrote it along with a couple of other people, but it has nothing to do with Connext. In fact, Connext technically Connext isn't even directly benefited by it. There's some like indirect benefits in that it promotes better competition in the space. But like technically speaking, it hurts Connext in the sense that we have our own liquidity, and this would potentially remove the need for like the value of having that liquidity in Connext to begin with. It may also, introduce certain cases where like Connext is really not the best option at all. But that's the point, right? Like if for example, Connext was not being very honest about a security model, then we want to try to create an open competition or open marketplace where a token issuer could look at Connext, could look at a bunch of different options, could decide to go with Connext today. But then in the future, if we decided to rug and like change our security model or whatever, then that token issuer should be able to change their mind. They should be able to say, okay, we don't want to work with Connext anymore. We want to go work with this other project. And that, or even if that's not the case, right? Say, for example, some point down the line, somebody just comes up with a way, way better security model and way, way more efficient mechanism for transferring tokens between chains that is as secure as possible. Well, in that case, as a token issuer, you should be able to opt into that. And I think that's a really, it's good that you stress this, Alex, because like, I think for token issuers, I strongly believe that like, regardless of which bridge you're using, regardless of which standard you're trying to adopt, or not standard, but however you're trying to like bridge your tokens between chains, you should use this approach. There is no reason for you to not use the standard. You can use the standard with other bridges, not even Connext, if you want, if that's the sticking point. But you should use this approach. And using this approach is the only way for this space to avoid more kind of multi-chain-like or harmony-like situations in the future.
Yeah, I think it's kind of, I mean, this was a niche thing that took me a while to really wrap my head around. It's kind of insane once you really understand how many representation tokens there are out there that are often obfuscated from the users, but also just how much capital leakage there is from cross-chain transfers. So every time you're transferring across chains and you have to have a swap behind the scenes, it's one of those user experience things that once you really look under the hood is kind of insane. And I think we've kind of come to accept or we've obfuscated enough, I guess. But yeah, it's pretty wild, the scale of it.
Yeah. Just to speak to that, by the way, like there's like added benefits of adopting this, which is if you eventually have the capacity to be able to mint and burn the canonical token, so the officially recognized version of a token across chains and across any number of chains, it makes cross-chain development so seamless. Right now, if I want to build a user experience where like we talked earlier about chain abstraction as like one of the core things that Connext is focused on. And a big part of the discussion around, optimizing chain abstraction user experience comes from this core issue, which is today, if you want to build, say, for example, you want to build a chain abstracted flow where you're a user and you're a dApp that lives on Arbitrum, that has liquidity pools, and you want to allow for users to be able to deposit into your liquidity pools from any chain. Today, when you do that, you have to take slippage on each bridge transaction. And so if you, and potentially even take slippage on swaps. So for example, if you want to make it possible for a user to swap from shitcoin A on Optimism and deposit shitcoin B into your pool on Arbitrum and do that in a single transaction, well, what's actually happening behind the hood is that you're swapping from shitcoin A to USDC or to some other asset, which means that you take like slippage and stuff like that from the aggregator. Then you bridge that USDC. And when you bridge that USDC, there's also slippage from the bridge. And then because there's no way to know what the slippage from the bridge is going to be, or the slippage from the aggregator is going to be on the destination chain, what you do is you put the minimum amount received into the destination chain aggregator swap. So when you swap from USDC to shitcoin B, you actually lose like 3 to 4% of your value, and it doesn't go anywhere. It just stays on the contract. And there's no way to really fix that, because there's no way to know from like before you send the transaction on Optimism in shitcoin A, there's no way to actually know how much USDC you're going to receive on Arbitrum. There's just completely impossible. This actually totally fixes that. It makes it possible for people to build cross-chain apps where you don't have to have like tons of off-chain routing stuff, and you don't have to have like, it means users don't end up losing potentially like thousands of dollars of value to just the contract. It's like kind of a game changer for how people build applications as well.
So I just wanted to jump in and really emphasize something that Alex had mentioned, which I actually wasn't aware of with the standard, is how you actually give a lot of flexibility to token issuers, because if they want to switch to another standard at a later point in time, like that's really helpful, because like we don't know if like the standard that you all have created is going to be like the de facto like situation or I would say like token standard that we're going to be using for the foreseeable future for the next 5-10 years. I mean, maybe it's what will be like the normal solution for like a year or two, and then maybe someone else comes up with something that's even better and more efficient. We don't know. So it's really good that you thought about not creating like a walled garden for that. So it's a very big benefit from, I guess, like the issuer's perspective, because if I'm a token issuer and I'm going and creating a token, I don't want to be locked into that. Like if I'm going and using some type of new solution, if I need to change at a later point in time because there's something bigger and better, then it's really, really helpful to have the option to be able to do that. So I just wanted to really sort of point that out and emphasize that that is definitely like a really added benefit that I actually wasn't aware of. So yeah, thank you.
All right, so we kind of blew off on a little bit of a tangent there. Do we want to jump into any Connext updates, or do we want to go into our integration partner showcase?
I can go through it quick. I definitely want to leave time for Fuji at the end, though.
Perfect.
So I'm going to do like a quick kind of 3-month look back. We have a lot of initiatives going on right now. So we pulled our data, just looking back at the last 3 months, which was our Q2. This was a huge period of growth, but also just really focusing on the core product for us. So over the last 3 months, we grew the amount of users by 60%, the amount of transactions by 125%, and volume by 70%. We also had a ton of focus really on the core product. I would say actually the number one focus this last 3 months was making sure our core product is as stable and reliable and ready for scale as possible. We're kind of, we like really hunkered down in this bear market. I picture it like we're like a coil that's been like really tightening up, ready for the next kind of wave. We expect to see a lot of kind of explosion of chains coming over the next year, and just preparing ahead for that. So we focused a lot on the core like performance. We were able to increase our throughput and load capacity by 10x while maintaining like 99.9% uptime. we were able to reduce bundle size of our SDK by 94%. And we launched a few new product lines, which is chain abstraction, X tokens, and XGov, all at the same time. So a huge props to the team, especially the engineering team on our side, for getting this done. Some of these like low-level changes, including just optimization of how we are managing gas and our hub and spoke model, was just like pretty monumental. So from here on, I think a lot more of the focus is going to be on growth. But that's just a quick look back on what the team's been doing. If you have any questions about things we worked on or where we're going from here, feel free to let us know. We're definitely focusing the next 3 months on, like I said, growth. We're growing several of the new kind of toolkits and initiatives we have, and then also expanding more chains and assets. So yeah, with that, I'll just kind of pause. I won't talk too much more, and I'll let Fuji have the floor.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. All right, so as Alex mentioned, we're going to hand things over again to Fuji, and you guys can talk a little bit about, well, you already talked about your product a little bit, but you can tell us a little bit more about your V2 update and expand on your experience integrating with Connext.
But yeah, so as a little bit of an overview, I gave a little bit of context in terms of what we're doing right now with the V2 launch, and we have some really exciting stuff coming up. We're actually going to be going live with Ethereum over the coming days. So we just launched about a week ago, and now we are essentially getting ready for the next stage of, I guess, like our product. So we're live on Polygon, Arbitrum, Optimism, and Gnosis Chain, going live with support for Ethereum in the next couple days. And then as we move into this coming week, we have some new vaults that are going to be supported. So right now, some of the vaults that you can use inside of the product, they are all borrowing vaults. So you can go and deposit ETH and take out a loan in USDC or DAI. We also have a vault on Polygon that supports Matic X and USDC. And this coming week, we'll be supporting different types of LSTs. So if you're not familiar with what an LST is, it is a liquid staking token or a liquid staking derivative. And what that means is you're essentially taking the network's token and staking it into essentially the network to help participate in consensus, and you're able to receive staking rewards for doing so. And so obviously that's a little bit better than just going and staking your traditional ETH or regular Matic, because you're able to get interest on top of the asset itself. And we're going to be supporting that on pretty much every single chain that we have integrated. So that's going to be 5 different chains, which will be Ethereum, Polygon, Arbitrum, Optimism, and Gnosis chain. So we'll have a wrapped staked ETH vault supported on all of those chains. So you'll be able to go and deposit that as collateral and take out a loan in USDC, which will be really cool. And then fast forward about let's say like a month from now, we're going to be adding support for a new network to the product, which is going to be BNB chain. So we're going to be supporting the money markets that are on BNB chain, so you can go and do some of the same operations that you're able to do on these other chains and expand the liquidity and assets that you're going to be able to support inside of the product. So I'll take a quick pause and see if Prague wants to sort of jump in and add anything to that.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. I'm gonna add some users' perspective, because obviously that our users want to get most interesting perks, and we are trying to run some really cool community programs, and we will introduce a couple in the nearest future. So probably it's currently really good time to join us, our community in Discord and Twitter, and like just stay tuned, because obviously that in this bear market situation, everyone try to find some perks, and like I believe our friends from Connext also running some cool community programs. Actually follow them, and it's really interesting. Probably if Arjun or Alex will have time at the end of the call, they can speak a little bit about Connext community programs, because it's really interesting to understand how you try to attract liquidity providers and quality users into the Connext, because obviously that unfortunately a lot of people just doing airdrop farming, trying to get some stuff in the future, but we need to attract as much as possible really quality guys who believe in Connext product, also the same like Fuji product. So as I said, we will run more community programs in the future, and actually it will be my question at the end of the call regarding some community perks, because I believe a lot of Fuji guys, I mean Fuji Finance community, joining this Connext call, trying to understand how to proceed and move to the next stage with all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that. It's a good question. So, in terms of like getting people into the community, I think first of all is having just a really strong product, and from there you can run different incentive campaigns, right? And so of course you're going to get a wave of farmers. I think like farming users is not necessarily entirely bad. I think that, farming users are helping you with growth. They're helping you with testing the product. A lot of times they're giving you feedback on the product. So I don't think it's all bad, but there's definitely a like retention drop. So I think the key thing is, using what you can mechanisms for growth. So some of the things we've done are like Galaxy campaigns. We had, I think, like 4,000 unique participants in the last one. And a key thing there is like, of course, you're going to get people that are farming. Ideally, your product experience is strong enough where you retain like a decent amount of those users. I mean, this is just the reality of the space, right? Is that there's a lot of kind of incentives and games going on. And you're not going to retain everyone. And I think that's kind of the cool part of Web3 as well. It's kind of the fun part. But yeah, I think that it's definitely a good question on how to best build and retain communities that everyone's trying to solve in this space. And I think it really comes down to having a really strong mission that people can align with, really finding the users that will be long-term kind of supporters of the project, and just having a really good product. I think ultimately, like product-led growth is probably the most lasting kind of thing you can do. But yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. I mean, because my general idea, sometimes as a DeFi degen, I'm really hard DeFi degen in last 3 years. And sometimes I'm just thinking about Aptos, Sui, or another ghost chains. I mean, like, why they just did this stuff, and what's next for them. They got really like overpriced valuation from my perspective, and like they just trying to do, and they got a lot of retention about airdrop farming, then airdrop they token, and that it just end. I mean, we can see on Aptos and so it just another ghost chains. So for me as a like professional community designer, it's really like hard to understand how we can incentivize people without just give them some airdrop, and then they will tell us like, okay, thank you guys, and like just buy. We are moving to another airdrop opportunity. But you answered my question. You should to build strong product. You should build strong community, and you just like move around and like proceed with the people that your community should be part of your product. I mean, like they want and need to understand how your product has some advantages compared to another product, or they can move around and proceed with your product. So thanks for your like really good answer.
That's it. It's like definitely probably the one of the toughest things to face in this space is just how to retain users. It's like really there's a ton of really cool growth levers, and then retention is like. But that's a difficult thing just in general, like even in Web 2, right? It's very easy to grow with people downloading a new app. It's really hard to retain them. So I think this is just a product thing that we run into a lot for sure. And it comes down to what we already kind of just said. But yeah, if you come up with a awesome new idea here, I would love to talk, because we're constantly batting this around in the product community in Web3 and just in Web3 in general.
I have some ideas, and I should just understand how to create it more like value proposal, because I believe generally as an ecosystem you should build some projects around, for example, Connext, like cornerstone of the new cross-chain ecosystem, building some really cool projects around. And that's why, for example, Arbitrum ecosystem currently, like I believe when we count total value locked, most popular DeFi ecosystem, and Optimism also, because they built really cool project around this ecosystem, and they just move around all community and they just like exist inside. So it's could be really great opportunities to both of us, like Connext is Stoner Cone, and Fuji, it's like one of the blue chips on this cornerstone to move together to expand this ecosystem and to offer to our users great opportunities to earn money together. I mean, like it's really good when we can offer opportunities. At the end of the day, every one of us here, not only for DJ and play or some for casino play, but also for earn money. And if we can offer to our users some cross-chain farming opportunities, leverage opportunities, and we can resolve problem of liquidity fragmentation, which I believe Fuji Finance already doing. And actually in the nearest future, probably in August, we will introduce not only borrowing but lending model, which means you also will lend cross-chain money, and it will be another opportunity for the users. So let's keep it together. Let's just move on and progress with a lot of it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the biggest thing, we're in a bear market, right? So the biggest thing, just taking a step back, is I think increasing just partnership and openness in the industry in general. So if you look at the amount of users in overall in Ethereum and the amount of projects there are, it's not a net positive strategy to always try to compete. I think the biggest thing is like propping each other up and being really open with other teams. So strategically, we talk about this a lot. Our focus really is not trying to carve out market share of the existing pie of users, but to grow the pie, to grow the amount of users in this space, because it will kind of lift up all projects. The reality is we are in a bear market. I think we're coming out of that hopefully soon, but it's definitely a tough time. And so collaborating with other projects and like figuring out how to collectively create a better user experience that can reach higher adoption with more people or businesses outside the space is probably the biggest thing we can do. And just for Fuji, just to plug, like I think you guys have like actually a differentiated, really, really badass project. So yeah, I don't know. I've been super bullish on Fuji, so we'll definitely keep working with you guys closely on that.
Much love. Much love.
All right, so we're getting near the top of the hour here, so we're going to start pulling a wrap up. I'm going to give everybody an opportunity just to say some final words, talk about what they got coming down the pipe, what's coming next before we give a goodbye. So we'll go in a similar order to how we started. So we'll start with Mark. If you want to give any final comments or words, that'd be great.
Sure, yeah. Just lots of stuff to look out for, both from Fuji and Connext. Really excited about what everybody's building. I mean, I keep seeing new integration partners that are popping on the scene for Connext. Lots of really cool announcements coming out from Fuji. So definitely keep an eye out on, I guess, like both of us with what we have coming out. So yeah, let's keep building and keep taking the space forward. So that's really all I have to say.
Perfect. Prague, any other thoughts?
Yeah. Thanks to the whole Connext family that you invite us and you join with us, and really glad that we are moving this space together forward to onboard next 1 billion users into Web3. And thanks. Have a nice day, guys. Bye.
Perfect. Thanks. Arjun.
Nothing specific. I mean, I think like the main thing is thank you all for joining, and jump into our Discord if you want to keep up to date with some of the awesome stuff that we're doing. As Alex mentioned, the name of the game for Connext right now is building public goods and trying to grow the pie to basically try to unfuck bridging. And if that's something that resonates with you, and if you want to help actually push the space to be better, and help grow the ecosystem for everyone, then definitely reach out.
Definitely. And last but not least, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, +1. Not much more that can be said, but we love the community, and thanks everyone for listening.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you everybody for sitting down with us today. Huge appreciation, of course, to our speakers for both Connext and our partners with Fuji. I highly recommend that if you're not already following all of the speakers in this space on Twitter, that you, of course, do so. They are the foremost minds in the space and definitely worth your click. Also, if you're a builder or a developer interested in building on Connext or further exploring the xERC20 standard, please join us on Discord. As Arjun mentioned, you can join us at discord.gg/Connext. Finally, thank you so much to our listeners for joining us on today's community call. You can join us again tomorrow, if you like, for another Twitter Spaces, which will be happening at 3 p.m. UTC. We'll be diving further into the xERC20 standard with, of course, Connext and our guests, Modular Media and Hyperlane. Until next time, thanks again for coming out, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.